Trusty Ape. Hello, happy Friday. It is Black Friday. Hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving or Indigenous Peoples Day or whatever thing you might have celebrated yesterday, or if you didn't have a celebration, maybe it was just a day, and I hope it was good for you. We had a lovely feast with some family over and good times. There were no creepy uncles, and good fun was had by all. And hello, happy Friday, Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, good to see you. Oh yeah, I forgot, it did that thing to me. Oh no, I don't think I can change it now. Maybe I can change it from YouTube. They're showing the @ instead of the actual name, which is fine, because it's, still directing people to your channels, I suppose, when they do that. But that kind of, anyway, I'll deal with that later. So I had a video saved in the other watch later on my alt account that we'll get into here, and there is a link for that video in the description. We'll get into it in a second, but first, the theme song. Pop the lock.
Can I have the iPad?
No, it's not charged yet. Gosh. I got interrupted right at the beginning there. Okay, we're gonna start it over. No, no, we'll just say, Trusty April once again. Oh. I've been foiled. I've been botched. By an 8-year-old. Okay. Yeah, gotta love him. Hey, good to see you, Skeptic Philosophy. Alright, so this video is entitled Live Reading and Commentary, The Devil and Karl Marx. And apparently this is a long series. We're into like chapter 15 here, which is where I caught wind of this. So, yeah, I thought it was kind of fascinating when I was watching it a while back. And I saved it, and I thought we'd look at it today. So, without further ado, I think it gets into it like a minute into the video or something.
It has been my joy to equip the saints for the work of the ministry by preaching the Bible verse by verse, line by line, the whole counsel of God. Our audio and video messages have reached over 158 countries and are listened to by over 5,000 people each week. Many of you who listen weekly have been through our doors, and I'm thankful that you continue to use us as a resource for your enrichment and edification. We consider you all a part of our extended church family. As you know, San Diego is a spiritually dark and financially difficult place to exist as a local church, and yet, by God's plan and purpose, He's placed us here to boldly challenge the false faith by teaching that Jesus is the only way, truth, and life. My desire is that we would continue to be a bastion of light in this dark area, that we would keep bringing you consistent biblical teaching on a weekly basis. To that end, I'm asking that you would prayerfully consider partnering with us in your missions giving. To do so, go to Barabbas.com/give. I'm thankful for this task and look forward to
I don't think
partnership
don't
for
donate
years
the
to come.
church. Okay, here it is. What happened? It starts off with no audio now?
on Marx,
go.
and I'll explain what's going on. And then I had this experience. So last night, I like to pre-read the books before I go through them, and then when I go in depth before I teach them, I go through each chapter in depth before I teach. And so then last night, I was a little late to get to it, and I was looking at it, thinking, okay, I got this chapter down, and I realized, man, it's taking a turn. I don't remember But the argument from last week is concluded in chapter 15 in the conclusion. I'm like, well, okay, that's where we're going to take it. So I want to keep the punch of the book and not get in the weeds too much. And so chapter 15 is the one. And so tonight's going to be really important. And then we're going to switch gears. So next week, we're going to start a new book. And I thought really heavily about this. So I probably spent $100 on books last night. So Paul, you'll see that in the budget. Sorry. Anyways, you have to speed read as many books as you can to kind of see what's next and kind of look down the.
Wait, I mean, if that's your material, like you're not. You see that in the budget? Like, is he talking about like the church funds? Is he taking this like from the parishioner? He's like, I spent $100 of your money on books so I could, teach you about. I don't know. What's he talking about there? Skeptic Philosophy says dark area. Why you gotta shit on every place you go? Yeah, it's spiritually dark, man. Yeah, those Southern California, as far as my experience anyway, like lifestyle is it's definitely different down there, right? But I think they tend to put that on like any type of metropolitan area, especially like. There's a lot of the same people that'll talk smack about like San Francisco or any of those types of things, right? But if you think about it, that would be like the perfect place to take a church, right? Like if you were going to be, trying to evangelize to the people who, according to your worldview, at least is like. They are the most in need of that, you would think. And there's more people coming there anyway, just like because of the flow of the migration, right? But the people who are there probably feel they probably do feel like more hopeless or whatever in some ways because of those factors, right? But yeah, anyway, I think that's funny though. He's like, yeah, I spent $100 on the books, and you won't see that one in the budget. Yeah,
the pipe. And I found a book I want to do next, and I want to explain where we're at, and then I'm going to give you the preview of the next 3 books I believe we're going to do. This is called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. It's by a guy named Justin Brearley. Amazing is this guy writes, and it is based down in the 2000s, and you remember these guys, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, all the books that were coming out, The God Delusion, God is Not Great, all the stuff that was coming out, the crazy bus sign in Britain that said there's probably not a God, so live your life, all that, the campaigns where they called themselves the Brights and all the, and I kept telling you when I was teaching over these years, I'm getting old enough to remember what I taught on the day one. I was saying this over and over again. I said, look, this is such a temporary blip in the world of apologetics because atheism as a thing, as like an actual thing, only exists because of Protestant Christianity and what Charles Taylor called like the normal social imaginary that we have in our society that allowed
atheism only exists because of Protestant Christianity? How the fuck did you logic that one? There's all kinds of religious deconverts from every type of religion that become atheists, right, if they begin to reject the God claim. Like it's not like you convert from one religion to another, right? Like atheism is, the part where you reject the God claim, and it doesn't matter what religion you came out of, right? You're not going into another one because they're all making the same claim, eventually. Like,
allowed them to kind of poke holes to deconstruct sort of the narrative. And it's going to go away as Christianity...
So he blames Protestant apologetics, apparently.
Stops being the main view, and when that happens, the prevailing view in our culture is going to become paganism, and atheists are going to find that they don't have a very friendly environment in a pagan environment, and so they're going to have nowhere to go. And that's exactly what we are hearing today, right now, this very second. The new atheism is completely dead, absolutely dead, and you're watching the rise where all the folks that used to go on the blogs and the conferences...
I think he's wrong about that too, because I would say like traditionally, yeah, pagans would still. So like the whole thing with like the modern pagans, my understanding of it is that they're more, in line with agnostics, right? And so they're like agnostic and even atheist pagan churches that like practice ritual, right? Like based on ancient rituals, but they're not actually believing in the deities.
Of atheists, they're now listening to Jordan Peterson. They're now listening to this guy named Tom Hall. They're listening to the guys that used to be speaking from an atheistic worldview who are now actually saying, well, you know what, we were wrong. We do actually kind of need Christianity, even if I don't yet believe in it. And so the book is actually a positive book. And the reason I like it, what we're going to get to tonight, I've been building a case. And what we've done is we're just
Well, Jordan Peterson never said he didn't believe in it, as far as I recall. He was like speaking in such a way that he was like, well, even if I didn't believe, then I would still think this, right? Like that's what some of those guys do. I don't believe that Jordan Peterson is an atheist. I don't think he would even claim to be agnostic, based on the arguments that I've heard from him. Although I haven't really listened to a lot of him in a while. In this same Watch Later list, though, I do have an interview with him and Sapolsky that I'm supposed to go back and rewatch because, anyway.
We're just looking at the same thing we looked at in Truman's book before with this Marxism book. So the case I'm trying to make is that Marxism is a destructive force. The goal of Marxism is destruction of society totally. But up to this point, I've been focused on Marx himself, the devil.
The goal of Marxism is the destruction of society. Wow, that's crazy, bro. It's crazy. I love how anytime people try to reform society, or there's like some mention, like myself, like I believe that the Constitution should be abolished and rewritten and, reestablished, right? People like that would call that like the destruction of society. It's like, no, I want to build a better society. I want better foundations for the way that we conduct ourselves, right? I don't think it is adequate, to use a 200-year-old document, I think this thing needs to be refreshed. It needs to be updated. It needs to be modernized, right? And I think that's true of any aspect of the system, right? As long as it is affecting all or most of the people within it, right? It needs to be constantly looked at and revised, and like there's just no way around that. Like if you just keep doing things the way you've been doing them, like first of all, there's no innovation there, right? You're gonna keep getting the same results, even if those results are not always positive, right? And then you just say, well, that's just like a byproduct of the system, If we have this many people who get the shit end of the stick, they can't get housing, they can't get employment. Well, then we just have to accept that, those people need to be, on the street or whatever. They will die in the street, right? And that should be unacceptable in any society, but especially in a society that claims to be like the most progressive, the most inclusive, the most free and just society in the world or whatever, then you should really be working towards correcting those issues.
The Devil and Karl Marx and classic Marxism, and you can see its effects. You can see its effects still in Europe. You can see it in the countries around the world. But you could see its effects most prominently right now in the United States of America in what's now, I would coin as cultural Marxism. And so this last chapter takes us to that bent, and we're going to discuss it. So we should know where we're at by this point. But when you get to it, my goal for tonight is to understand the destructive force of that cultural Marxism. And remember, the goal of it is to destroy, not to put anything in its place. Only destroy, constant destruction. That's what Marx's goal was all along, and that's still true today with all the movements, LGBTQ plus, minus, everything. It's all to destroy, to destroy, destroy. And so what's left in its place is a void. And so people, normal people, your average...
So the LGBTQ plus movement is a destructive force in what way? Like, can you point to how it is, what is it even trying to destroy? Just society in general? Is it trying to... See, this is what I don't get. Like, they'll make these claims, but they don't qualify them. There's no way you could say, okay, like, say that I was trying to, burn down a grocery store. I don't know. We're going to like the most absurd example here, right? Like, how would you prove that? If I'm outside the grocery store and I'm protesting it, am I trying to destroy it? Like maybe I'm, advocating for like a boycott, which would effectively lead in the store going out of business if I'm successful, right? And I'm still not, like taking a Molotov cocktail and putting it through the window or something like that. What it you're like a destructive force. Right? No, and these are individual people advocating for their own liberties or the liberties of their loved ones, right? Which is supposedly what this whole endeavor is like based on, your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? So they want to be able to pursue happiness in their own way, and somehow you see that as a destructive force against the society in which it takes place. And how did you get to that conclusion?
You go to the grocery store, fill up your gas, do your thing. Not religious people, even just normal people. They're feeling sort of the stress on this, and it's interesting that we always talk about it. If you've listened to me for any amount of years, I've said this all along. There's a pendulum swing, and it has to swing back. That's just how history works in this case, and so.
I have not. I think I listened to like one other stream from this guy, and I did. I might have subscribed to the channel on my old account, but I haven't. Yeah, this is like my only experience with this guy so far. Skeptic Philosophy, reading the comments here, says, the new atheist movement did not stop. It first hit media on TV. This has shifted the internet. We don't see debate in uni much because people self-host or organizations host. Yeah. And then Skeptic Philosophy said, but atheist numbers are up, not down. 2013 to 2023 is 2 to 4%, and not counting the nuns or no religion growth. Yeah, I've seen, I don't remember what year it was, but that was, when they talked about the rise of the nuns, I want to say it was like 2016 or something like that. It was that Pew poll or whatever. But yeah, it's obvious that at least there's more people, if not identifying atheist, at least say they are non-religious or like non-denominational or whatever, right? So they're not affiliating with any church. So that's definitely, a push in that direction.
And so in this country, we are prime for, and I hate the word revival, I don't want to use that word because it says we're somewhere, but we're prime for a religious sort of rebirth in this country, I believe, in a big way. And I've been saying this for a while. It's just, I think we peaked. I think Obama in 2008 peaked us into the critical theory that we're going to talk about with Marx. I think we're reaching the end of that road. Regardless of who wins the election, the new atheism is dead, and
Is he, so I don't know if because he kind of glossed over it there, is he blaming Obama for this peak, whatever critical theory he's talking about, or is that just like, is it because of Obama, or is it just coincidentally happened under Obama? Because I feel like they're probably going to blame it on Obama in some way, even though he himself also identified as a believer or whatever, right, at least publicly. Because the only way you can get elected into the presidency in the United States is to claim to be a believer.
Paganism of the left is so tyrannical, even normal people are looking for a story that's better. And so remember, the whole point of Marx is to get rid of stories. So this new book we'll get to next week, we'll just kind of describe that path. I don't know if we'll cover the whole thing, I just want to address it. And then the following book after that, I want to teach, so I'm going to take a break. So the next book I want to teach you is a book that is in that line, but I'm going to take a break because I need you guys to breathe for a minute, But the book I'm going to go to after that is going to be, here I have it written down so I can not forget, is we're going to change gears, having established, okay, Marx broke everything down. Here's a story of how we're going to fill in the gospel story, right? Then the next book we're going to do is, okay, so if everyone's now looking for meaning, guess who's going to be out there for shopping? All the cults. So we're going to cover the kingdom of the cults. And so Walter Martin's Kingdom of the Cults, it's an 800-page tome. We're going to go through a cult every week if I can do that. So we'll cover every cult we can think of. There's not a specific chapter on Catholicism, but if you need that, we'll do that too.
So yeah, like here and I just had to like Google this just to clarify. So according to, of course the Google results, Barack Obama is a Christian who came to faith later in life. Having been raised primarily by his Christian mother and her parents, he was baptized and became a formal member of the United Church of Christ in 1988 and attended the Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago for many years. The Obamas withdrew their membership in 2008 due to controversial statements made by their former pastor, Reverend Jeremiah Wright. And since moving to Washington, D.C., they have attended several different Protestant churches, including Baptist and Episcopalian congregations, but have not joined a single church to minimize disruption to services. Okay, so there's that.
So the kingdom of the cults, and then when we're done, we're going to cover the most cult-ish thing within evangelical Christianity, which is going to be ultra-charismatic, sort of new apostolic reformation. So we're going to cover, and I'm going to redo a book I did a long time ago called Strange Fire.
Yeah, Skeptic Philosophy said, the guy said that the whole point of Marxism is to get rid of the story. Yeah. He said a few things. He was like, it's all about destroying society, like Marx's object, and then he threw out several objectives in there, I guess. Yeah.
So that's the order. So again, we're going to finish the book tonight on Marx. The next book we're going to do is on the new atheist being dead in the water, and it's a very positive, encouraging book after Marx's discouraging book. And then we'll get into the kingdom of the cults. You'll learn about all the cults. And then after that, we'll cover Strange Fire and kind of the argument about sort of cessationism, charismatic theology, and how we should approach that. And then after that, if we're alive and Christ hasn't come back, there's a great book I want to get into called Reimagining Apologetics, which is remember this guy named Charles Taylor? He's basically answering the call of Charles Taylor, like how do we present the gospel, not just as a set of doctrines, but as the story in the culture that's lost its main narrative of story. And what he means by that is like, look, when you watch the early Star Wars, there was a narrative story, right? When you watch the old Disney, there was a narrative story, right? The good guy's supposed to win, the prince is supposed to get the princess, they're supposed to slay the dragons, and there's a narrative arc, of redemption, good guy, bad guy in the stories, and then we've lost that narrative. That's the whole Marxist infiltration. We've lost the narrative.
Well, you realize he's talking about fiction. He's like, no, life should play out just like fiction, right? There's a clear distinction, black and white, good guys, bad guys. And the good guys always win in these stories, right? That's called fucking actual fiction, bro.
Lost the story. There's no more Tolkien. There's no more of this. It's all been reimagined as, what if we imagine that, the hobbits were actually like sort of, I don't know, two-spirit, Chicana, lesbian, wolf people. You're like, let's do a book on that. It's like, okay, we've lost the narrative, and the culture's searching for that story. So
you've lost the narrative. Like, you can create that story. Like, there's no reason somebody can't make that story work, right? It just doesn't work for you. You just don't. It hurts your feels, right? Like that's the whole. It's like, what's wrong with that story? What is wrong with the lesbian Chicano wolf people? Nothing. I mean, in principle, it could make a fine story.
I'm really excited about that, but to that end, that's where we're going next. If you have any questions, I don't have answers for you. One last thing. I jump around. If you can't keep up, that's fine. I'm going through books right now. And so you don't have to be where I'm at right now to understand the argument, but all this stuff is online, so you can go back. And so again, we've covered over these last weeks who Karl Marx is, and now we're going to talk about what that means today. So let me say a quick prayer and we'll jump in. So God.
I just want to, quick correction there. Who Karl Marx was, right, he tended to get these things, mixed up. Like, who Jesus is, maybe was, just saying,
There's a lot of information. I pray for these people right now. I pray for what's happening in our own lives. And God, as we know that it can be discouraging, as we have some encouraging books to come into after this, I thank you that we can see the actual enemy, the actual ideological enemy, the demonic doctrines that have come into our culture, and they are here. And Father, help us to be bold of spotting them and resisting them, and help us to understand our time at bat and to know how to live in this time and place as for your gospel. In Jesus' name, amen. A couple things. One of the other goals I have in these Tuesday night apologetics is not to make this, and let me say this the nicest way possible. I care about you, but I'm not teaching to you, which makes me a bad teacher. What I mean by that is a good teacher teaches to you. I want to communicate with you. I care about you. I'm more communicating what I'm interested to put it on record before I die, if I can be honest. I'm picking books I'm interested in. I'm picking subjects that I'm interested in. The reason I'm doing that is, look, I didn't grow up in the church, but one thing I can say from sort of surveying the landscape is churches are largely filled with pastors who are middle managers. And this isn't being mean or just the honest truth. And so all of the stories and the
It's interesting. So he's not raised in the church, allegedly, right? And so we'll just take his word for it, right? But he comes to the church, and apparently he, in all of his, Christian humility, believes himself such an intellectual juggernaut. He's like, no, I don't care what these pastors are talking about, Which in a way I respect it, and in a way I'm like, okay, wait, but isn't this against like the whole humility thing they're always talking about? Yeah, because I just feel like a lot of Christians might find that to be like a pompous attitude, but apparently he's got his congregation and they're buying it. So.
And the teaching you guys are getting is constantly boiled down to its most basic level, as if you guys are idiots, and you're not idiots. And I don't care how young you are, you guys are the smartest. I mean, you guys are smart, you can understand stuff. So my job and desire has been to take source material of the best writing from the best thinkers, and I don't care how hard it is, bring it here. And so for the last 17 years we've been doing that, but it's hard. Not for me, it's hard for me, but it's hard for you guys sometimes to get into it. So just be patient with yourself. Some of it's going to take some work. I promise you it will pay off, okay? So right now we're covering Mark, so let's go into it. So chapter 15, all right, we are 5.
So we're not actually covering Marx, just to be clear. So this apparently is a Christian author who wrote on Marx, right? So that's kind of misleading for him to tell them that too, because it's like, well, no, unless you actually read Marx, you can't just read somebody writing about Marx and think that, so, and I've heard it said that you would actually have to read more contemporary thinkers who have written about Marx to really get perspective on it, because certain parts of Marx are, possibly vague or open to interpretation or incomplete, right? I have not read Marx in its entirety. I've read excerpts of Marx, and I've read a couple of other authors who have written on Marx, but I wouldn't claim to have any authority of knowledge on Marx in that sense, right? I understand some of modern Marxism, and certainly more of like modern, like democratic socialists and what their political theories are, right? And so I don't attribute that all to Marx, and these guys obviously do. They lump it all in the same pool. So
We're 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. So declared Barack Obama in Columbia, Missouri on October 30th, 2008, on the cusp of his historic presidential election. He predicted a defining moment in history to give this country the change we need. It was a striking statement, boldly revolutionary, perhaps surpassed only by the response of those in attendance who, rather than pausing to reflect upon such an audacious assertion, wildly applauded. Now, let me just stop for a minute. I want you to understand, I was alive, most of you were alive during the Obama presidency, and again, the language and the rhetoric that came forth, you largely heard it as you were driving in your car. One of the things I want you to get is I want you to spot this stuff when you hear it. So going forward, you're not just like, it sounds great, hope and change, and you're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, right? You can see it. Because back in 2008, the church was just starting, and I was focused on other things. I was hearing something like, that makes me uncomfortable, but I wasn't as good at some of the history stuff. And I think now hearing that kind of language is a little different. What do we say this? To be sure, Obama enthusiasts would have ecstatically cheered anything he said at the moment. He could have promised everyone a magical unicorn. Obama himself admitted to serving it as a kind of blank screen upon which Americans desiring some warm and fuzzy hope and change could project whatever they wanted. The argument here was it didn't matter what he said, and that's fine. Now, interesting enough, we're just getting done with the Biden presidency. And again, it was presented, everyone voted for Biden because Trump seems crazy. And we came through a year of the BLM riots and
So that tells you when this video is from, okay.
COVID, and everyone's just, I just can't handle any more crazy. So they're like, let's just get friendly grandpa here who just stayed in his basement. So everyone voted for Biden because he was a sleepy grandpa and we wanted some normalcy. And then Biden decided I'm going to be the most transformative, radical president, even more radical than Obama, and Kamala Harris is following in suit. And so if you're following the policy...
So there's an interesting interpretation of history. But yeah, I mean, so I think this guy is probably MAGA, just judging by everything he said here, which it's amazing, these fucking guys.
The procedures and the things that are being put forward, it's shocking. If we just go to sleep and listen to Pablum and we're like, cool, I'm into the vibes, I like Doritos too, you deserve what you get. But But even then, the words from Obama, when he said the words fundamentally transform, should have set off alarm bells. Remember, Obama was a community organizer trained under very Marxist teachers. He was open about this, and people didn't understand what was going on. But Americans generally don't do fundamental transformation. We make changes, okay, right? Yes, maybe small, maybe large, but the remarkable system that we have that was established by our founders, is pretty stable, largely because it wasn't about a single man or woman or anyone else entering the White House to create fundamental transformation. Elections should be boring, in other words. That's the whole point of our nation. We should have boring elections that we don't care about. But one of the things...
Where does he get that? That's just not... it's literally a country born out of revolution and dissent from the... Oh my God. And then they're like, no, we just want boring, stable. Yeah, well, people want stability. Of course people want fucking stability, right? But ultimately, most people want to see some type of positive change happen in their lifetime. They want to feel like they are a part of implementing those changes, whatever it is, whether it's getting the homeless off the street, feeding the poor, getting unemployed people into jobs, stopping war, stopping famine, like all of these things that matter to people. We don't want to see other people suffer most of the time if we're not fucking sociopaths, right? Or psychopaths or what have you. And so generally people, they vote and they believe that they're voting for the common good and progress. They don't want more of the same if the same thing isn't working for, most of the people or all of the people. Right? And so this is the problem. These people just believe the system just works as it is. You just got to keep doing the same thing over and over again. Then you're never going to get different results, right? And there are, apparently there's enough people who believe that the results are not optimal, and we could do better. We can perfect this system, or at least try to.
One of the things that we talk about is if we have a rule of law, the thing that makes our country work under the rule of law, we hear that term all the time, is I know that if my opponent wins an election, I'm not too stressed because they're under the same laws that I'm under, and so all is well. Once we have people start...
Well, that whole theory has gone to shit at this point, hasn't it? Because that person is not under the same laws that I am under. They're not by a long shot, man.
Start reinterpreting and having equity in the laws. I'm going to, Lady Justice takes her blindfold off and I'm picking winners and losers. Well, then all of a sudden the person in power gets to choose what's misinformation. The person in power gets to choose what's hate speech. The person in power gets to start choosing. All of a sudden, elections become threatening to both sides, and it's a terrible thing. But again, when you understand that, who among us, other than the most radical revolutionaries, actually want to fundamentally transform the nation of Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, Lincoln, and Roosevelt, Kennedy, and Reagan? I mean, if you're a Christian...
How many times do you think he practiced that? Or, no. I mean, he's got it written down, right? So obviously, I'm just saying, say that 5 times fast, man.
What do we want? You're I want a fundamental church. I want people to know the gospel. I don't want to go into politics, and if you do, good for you, but most of us, that's not what we're focused on. Many people think America has many problems, but those can be addressed without a, quote, fundamental transformation. Ask professors who teach history or political ideologies, and they'll tell you that totalitarian communism, Marxism, Leninism, is the ideology that seeks fundamental transformation. So, you watch Hotel Rwanda, that's fundamental transformation at work. You watch areas where genocide happens, that's fundamental transformation. That's when a king takes office in the book, in the Bible, right? When a new king takes office and you kill all your brothers and sisters to make sure they can't ever threaten your throne, that's fundamental transformation, right? When Yehu takes office and you kill all the Baal worshipers, that's fundamental transformation. It's sometimes, good, bad, or indifferent. It's a big, tumultuous thing. And most of us aren't interested in that, but there's people that are, and that's the Marxists. Recall that in German ideology, among others, Marx and Engels said that in order to achieve communist consciousness and for the success of the cause, it's necessary...
I love this because I'm looking at it, it's when describing totalitarian communism, right, they refer to, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, right? But so this is a this is a misuse of communism, right? Or so it's not like what communists ideally are trying to achieve, right? And then when it says, like, self-identified communists hold a variety of views, but they include libertarian communism, or anarcho-communism, Marxist communism, non-Marxist communism. So those are like religious communists, right? So there's, the totalitarian regimes that take over once communism is affected, right? Those are unfortunate, but that's not the aim of communism, right? Like, it's unfortunate that people take power and then power corrupts the system, but that's not really the aim of what they're trying to achieve within the system. So that identifies maybe a flaw there that needs to be worked out, right? And so, I think we've done a lot better job in modern times, but yeah, I mean, it's still not without its problems. But it's kind of like they try to paint it like all of these countries like immediately turn into like some variation on 1984, which isn't necessarily the case, right?
Necessary that man himself should suffer a massive change. This change must come through, quote, a revolution, a process of, quote,
Hey, James Apperson, good to see you. James Apperson says, quote, change is bad, says the privileged white guy who likes things just the way they were under both Bushes and Trump. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no change for me, thank you. And yeah, that's essentially what he's saying. And he's like, anytime that people say we need to fundamentally change the country, they're actually trying to destroy it, right? They don't actually want to fix problems in the system. They just want to destroy the whole society, right?
Overthrowing the filthy yoke and founding a new society only in a revolution. And as we covered in earlier weeks, Marx himself said this is going to come through blood. This is going to come through violence. And so the Marxist ideology, again, has a death toll numbering upwards of 250 million people, and they're not shy about it, and it is a feature, not a bug. Violence was planned for, it is purposed, and it's there. And so the rhetoric we're in now, I've been saying all along, only leads to violence. And we have to get that back. One of the ways we get that back is to talk.
So, I mean, thus far, just if we're keeping score here, 16 minutes into this video, he's still just espousing his own opinions. He's not reading from the book or discussing the literature at hand, as far as I can tell. So, yeah.
Talk to people we disagree with a smile. Like, you realize, like, when you talk to people you disagree with, who fundamentally hate the things you say, and you can be kind and still talk to them, and not unfriend them or whatever, you've gone a long way to de-escalating sort of the Marxist rhetoric. Because in the Marxist rhetoric, there is no argument. Everything's a source of power. Once everything your opponent says is pure evil, all that's left is a fist. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing left to say, right? That's where the rhetoric is now. If you disagree with
No, I mean, once everything your opponent says is pure evil, but that's just your interpretation, right? And you're not going to continue to try and reason with a person, right, if you believe that their position is unreasonable, right? But your first instinct, at least for most normal people, I don't think, is not going to be to enter combat with them, right? Like, in modern society, we don't tend to go around engaging in violence against people we disagree with. We realize that we can just leave the situation, right? Now, if you're talking about, like, actual political revolution, yes, that does sometimes require violence, force or threat of force. But typically that's after conversation at the highest level fails repeatedly, right? The American Revolution, for example, it wasn't like they just flipped a switch one day and said, you know what, guys, we're just gonna take this whole thing over and, F them. Nobody did that. They tried to reach agreements, right? They tried, more peaceful forms of dissent, destruction of property, before it came to an actual all-out war, right? They did these various things to try and show threat of force and say, hey, we're not going to take it anymore. We need to reach an agreement. And then once you reach an impasse, that agreement's not coming. Hey, now we need to take decisive action. and that's when it reaches actual bloody conflict, you know.
With any policy, any words, there's no words left. You're just the worst ever. Let's get them. And so to de-escalate that, you have to stand in the gap, make your arguments calmly. And again, this is why guys like Jordan Peterson are so popular right now. Everyone's looking for someone that can stand up and not be bullied, but also not retaliate by, oh yeah, well, you're the worst too. Even though we're reading a book about Karl Marx being the devil.
That actually is what that's actually Jordan Peterson. Like, that's his whole thing, is like whataboutism, as far as I could tell. Also, once again, this is an older video, hasn't aged well, but Peterson obviously is not quite the strongman character that he portrayed himself as for many years, right? Lift yourself up by your bootstraps. Unless you have a benzo addiction, then go into a medically induced coma, And persona non grata says, every day millions die due to free market capitalism, and most who live to die another day are miserable. Yeah, I agree with that. And James Apperson also says, correction, 160,000 per day die because of capitalism. So then millions per week of people who would have lived longer in a humane system. Exactly. And one would think the most prosperous nations in the world could afford to, at least feed their poor, right? At least. But, no, it's too much to ask. We better hand that responsibility over to the churches. And then, as everyone is, well aware now of that viral TikToker who was calling around various churches in her area trying to get, like, baby formula or baby food. And they were like, sorry, can't help you. Don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. In general, though, Marx repeatedly urged that nothing less than the creation of a, quote, new world. His generation, he insisted, like the Jews that Moses led out of the wilderness, must conquer the new world and must also perish in order to make room for the people who are fit for the new world. He's literally talking about genocide. Communists would play the role of the sacrificial savior to deliver a new secular covenant for the new world. Again, let me repeat this to you. Marxism was never about secularism. Ultimately, it was an alternative religious ideology, and it hates religion, and it wants to wipe out Jesus. It hates the gospel. It hates the church more than anything else. But that
there's just no truth to it. Like,
that is the totalitarian task of communism. Indeed, the textbook definition of totalitarianism, which has been scribbled on a chalkboard every fall semester of this guy's school, has been to, quote, fundamentally transform, specifically to seek the fundamental transformation of human nature via some form of political ideology or cultural upheaval. Let me say it again. The goal is to fundamentally transform human nature through political, ideological, cultural upheaval. What does that mean?
I'm just looking at, I can't find quotes from Marx, but, like an overview that, and we know, like, religion is the opium of the mass, or the opium of the people, right? But even according to this, like, it basically says that, despite his criticism, Marx expressed sympathy for people who sought comfort in religion, recognizing that it provided a heart and a soul in a heartless world. Right, so there is still sympathy for the religion. It's not the elimination of that. It's just to keep it away from the political and economic systems, right? Keeping them out of power. They can have the church, if they want to go do their thing. And I say this all the time. I don't care if they want to go do their thing there. When they try to legislate it on, on other people's. Other people's rights, prohibit activities because of their personal spiritual, religious beliefs, right? That's when it crosses the line. And so it sounds like, Marx is essentially saying the same thing. Just keep your church out of the state, and that it's, not great for revolutionary thinking, right? Because specifically in the case of Christianity, it is a slave mentality, and so they do have a doctrine that says that basically to follow the authority, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, because it's somehow been placed there by God or something like that. which is my main problem with the Mormons at this juncture. Although I have not heard them speak about any politics in the church since I've been there, which was a short time, but so far none of that. But one thing I did notice in their articles of faith are acknowledging and respecting authority figures within the like the political, we have kings, I can't remember the whole thing, I could probably look it up, but yeah, basically that all of these kings are like appointed, and so we need to have some sort of reverence for them or something. And back here in the chat, James Apperson said Christians don't care because they figure the good Christians just go to heaven early and the bad people, or all the non-Christians, just go to hell early. So conservative Christians are just speeding up God's perfect plan. Yeah, not his time, our time. We want it now, right? Like, when is the rapture coming? Not fast enough. Let's build some more nuclear weapons, It'd be great.
What does that mean? That means that the normal way we view humanity, the normal way we view right and wrong, the goal is to completely upend that so we redefine what it is to be actually human. And this is a big deal. It's what 1984 was about in its essence.
He had to go to, I knew it because of the way he was talking, like, he has to reference 1984. There's no way he's not going to do it, and now he has.
So all that being the case, I winced when Barack Obama said that, and then felt sick to the stomach when I watched people blissfully and blindly applaud. Such blithe unthought is disturbing to see from inhabitants of a nation founded upon the extraordinarily thoughtful and stable principles of 1776. Again, this has been my theory. Brett loves to tease me, I've mentioned to you before, because I just feel like I'm going crazy. People will say things very plainly out loud that are absolutely insane, and people are like, fuck, that makes sense. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm not smart to understand this. We're just not paying attention. It's baffling to me, and I've watched it happen all the way through. I don't know how to handle it. But Obama's two-term presidency marked a turning point in our country. The country did actually seem to begin a fundamental transformation in that period and through the 2010s. Now, you're saying to yourself, like, I lived through that. I don't know if that's true. Go watch a show from 2007, the TV show. Look, honestly, like, you go watch the TV, and if you can get past the non-HD quality of it and whatnot. But you watch some of those shows, first of all, they look really old. I think if Marty McFly went back in his time machine, right, and he went back to the 1950s from 80 something, like if...
So now he's like, because technology has gone so far since, 2007, and also... I think he's talking about, basically what people consider to be socially acceptable, and how more people have come out and said, hey, actually, I do find this thing offensive. Whereas before, they would have just changed the channel or something like that. And when we got honest about it, we said, oh, yeah, more people are actually offended by certain language, certain stereotypes than we had previously thought. And it wasn't like they made a law against it. Still hasn't happened, although they keep saying that it's happening, right? But there's no law against many of these behaviors that people claim to be canceled for, right? It's just become less and less socially acceptable because we realize that it is hurting marginalized people, whether intentional or unintentional, right? And so the only means to stop doing that is to educate people and say, hey, you are actually hurting people, right? Your language does affect people. And so then the networks, who produce the TV and the movies, they adapt it accordingly so that it would be more inclusive for more people, less offensive to, and that's not even saying that, like, that there's still not, absolute free speech out there. Because there is, you can still find this stuff. But, it's just not being produced in the way that it was, and it's a response to what people wanted, right? It wasn't a means of control. It was a response to feedback from the consumer of the product. And then James Apperson says 1984 is a condemnation of conservative government and conservative religion. Exactly, 100%.
Like if we went back the same amount of years, it'd go back to 1994, just to put in perspective. If you want to feel a little old, it's crazy. I was in high school then. But just understand this idea, everything has changed very dramatically. We were here, we were talking about these things at that time, but some of the dramatic changes that came about is all of a sudden the front ending of the LGBTQ plus and then the transgender movement, Obama really put it on the main stage right before he came.
I love how he says LGBTQ plus and then transgender movement, as if trans isn't in the. Okay, so right, and no, I mean, did Obama? I don't think Obama did anything specifically for like helping trans people that I can remember. Maybe mistaken. I mean, he's definitely about more inclusivity, but I'm going to check that real quick.
Before he came out of his presidency, he's like, last minute, by the way, girls can go in boys' bathrooms and boys can go in girls' bathrooms. Anyways, peace out. And we're like, what? And it's a law. If you don't do it, you don't get money. And that just, we're like, what is going on? Why would you go out like that? You know, it wasn't like, hey, let's all have a good economy. Let's do this. He's like, by the way, men should go into women's bathrooms. Like, what? And all of a sudden, people like, everyone was aghast. And now everyone's like, how dare you? There's a fundamental transformation that happened. But it didn't happen in the areas hoped for or even feared in 2008. That Obama perhaps maybe even had.
Okay, so I see what he's so what he's referencing here is that the Obama administration issued guidance to public schools directing them to allow transgender students to use restrooms and locker rooms consistent with their gender identity. Directive was issued through a letter from the Departments of Education and Justice, which interpreted Title IX to prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. I can still read the Roman numeral, apparently, and threaten schools with lawsuits or withdraw federal funding if they did not comply. So it is guidance. There is threat of repercussions if they don't follow that guidance. It's not like an executive order, say, or something like that. And so... And then the Trump administration officially rescinded the guidance exactly, a few months later. So,
even had in mind himself, let alone dared to mention in Columbia, Missouri. It has not been a fundamental shift in attitudes regarding the role of government, taxation, regulations, economics, class, or even healthcare. Kind of boring seeming stuff. Where Obama had a signature legislative achievement, it didn't happen in foreign policy. Like if you were a policy wonk back then, you'd be kind of concerned when he talked about Obamacare because you're like, government health care is a bad idea. And then you have the socialist people like, no, it's not, it's great. Look at England or Canada, which, oh, really? How many of you drive to Canada to go to the doctor? But the reality is that true fundamental transformation in America and the West generally has come in the realm of culture. Notably in matters of sexual orientation, gender, marriage, and family. So in 2004, that was the first year that I believe gay marriage was made legal in Boston. I was there in Boston at the time. 2008, California voted against gay marriage. The California voted and it passed. Prop 8. So we were here. Maybe you voted then, if you were alive. Some of you were young. So we voted and we said, we don't want to have gay marriage in California. And then it was vetoed. And so that's Prop 8 passed, and we said, no, we don't want gay marriage. And it was vetoed. That's in 2008. The state of California, our state, Gavin Newsom style, right? California, crazy.
And on Prop 8, yeah, it was not actually vetoed by the governor. It was later overturned by the courts and by Proposition 3, passed by voters in 2024, so that's very recent. But yeah, it was overturned in the courts. So.
Crazy, abortion capital, come here, was like, no, we don't want gay marriage. Think about how radically we've shifted. Where Starbucks and Target's like, wear the darn rainbow. How dare you? We've gone so far, so fast. It's helpful to remember how radically fast that's happened. And it's important that you understand how Marxist this is. And that's the whole point here. The shift has been unprecedented and far beyond anyone's imagination. In 2008, it was signaled most conspicuously in the 2015 when Obama White House illuminated the colors of the LGBTQ rainbow on the day that Obergefell decision, when the Supreme Court, by a one-vote margin, rendered unto itself the ability to redefine marriage, which was it was the most absurd decision, and it imposed a new constitutional right on all 50 states. Again, this happened, so what did the White House do? They painted the White House the rainbow. If there ever was a picture of I
wonder what in the first place, right, for me, I think this falls into the category of, to me, I think this should be like a church-state separation issue, right? The government should not define marriages at all, like in the first place. It doesn't, like, why would the government define partnership between one or a group of individuals in their home? Doesn't make any sense to me. The only thing I can think of, right, is we're talking about, like, for tax purposes, if you're registering or filing as a married couple, right, or a married throuple, whatever. I guess they wouldn't recognize that, right? But like, it really doesn't seem like something the government should have any say in my opinion. James Apperson says, the front ending is bad. I prefer my gays coming in the back way. That's great. And Skeptic Philosophy says, if you just change our gay or LGBT with black in everything he says, then it sounds a lot like some churches in the 60s and 70s. Yes, very true. Yeah, whoever we want to marginalize today, right? And then James Apperson says, gotta love when Christians plant flag of ownership over entire concepts like marriage, as if they invented the concept of marriage and then copyrighted it. Exactly. We were talking about this last night. Greetings, My Awesome Life. Good to see you. My Awesome Life and I were talking about that a little bit last night because it was brought up in a show we were watching that that certain pagan cultures used wedding bands in their marriages, right? And I was like, and I'm pretty sure they might have done that before the Christians. But anyway, it's just a thought.
A fundamental transformation. This is it. This is the nation weighing in here on, like, literally the nature of marriage, and then again the nature of biology, male, female, and whatnot. And that's just one of the countless accomplishments heralded and boasted by the Obama administration. In June 2016, to celebrate the one-year anniversary of Obergefell, the White House press office released 2 extraordinary fact sheets detailing Obama's vast efforts to promote LGBTQ rights at home and abroad. Again, they'll tell you what it is. I like, as an aside right now, right? You have to see what's happening. But as an aside, when people talk about, there's a question to Kamala Harris in the last debate, and then Tim Walz got the same question, his debate, about what are you doing about climate change? And they all said the same thing. Well, what do they call it? The Inflation Reduction Act really was a climate change bill. We're like, oh, so now you can just say that now? You can just admit that the whole thing was a farce. The ability to try to lower inflation was really us spending way more money to increase inflation so that you can give money to your, the green friends that you have in this place. It was lying all along. And here's the Obama White House being like, look at how much we've done for LGBTQ rights everywhere else. Not only was it telling that the White House would make this list in the first place and tout it, but the actual sheer length of the list was really stunning to behold. There was no similar list of such dramatic changes by the Obama White House in any other policy area. There wasn't a list on, like, look at our foreign policy, look at our economic policy, look at our tariff policy. None of it. It was just a giant list of how awesome their LGBTQ stuff was. The achievements included the infamous Obama bathroom fiat, through which, according to Barack Obama's executive word, all public schools were ordered to revolutionize their restrooms and locker rooms to make them available to teenage boys who want to be called girls. Now, what happened the first time? And it's so irritating, and maybe some of you even said it, so repent if you...
Once again, they don't get that this is a response to people who want this, right? It's not the government pushing these ideas on people, right? It's people asking the government for representation and the government actually representing them, right? Which is their fucking job. That's literally their job.
Repent if you did. What's the big deal? It's just a bathroom. I'm like, I don't know. Tell that to all the women's sports now that are going against men, because that's how the whole thing goes. It's all part of the same game. Looking back, it's the understanding of human sexuality. It's a subversion, really, that Barack Obama left a stamp upon the United States. No other president has ever made such a shift than in this moment. One can hope the stamp's not indelible, but from there, the culture's fundamental transformation has hit warp speed, with the number of optional gender identities, for example, expanding exponentially.
Yeah, we've got a troll, and he's been hopefully he's been deleted. Let's look out for the troll.
Now again, you might be like, I love all that. Maybe someone's listening to this like, I love all those changes. Fine. what I want to focus on is that the nature of those changes wasn't through sort of argumentation. Nobody voted for the bathroom law. It came by fiat. It came down from on high, and everyone was then culturally sort of told to act in this way. Changes.
Yeah, see, his whole idea is like, nobody was doing this until Obama told him to do it, which is like complete bullshit. And being in California, he has to know that, right? Like, obviously, there were enough people who, once again, whether it affected them personally or somebody they loved or they just had fucking empathy for their fellow humans, there's enough people out there who are not being recognized, right? They're not having their needs met, and in some cases, they are being actively oppressed by people like yourself, right? Because you hate their identity, because somehow you think it has, some moral significance to you based on your beliefs about the Bible.
There more than anywhere else seemed irreversible by anything other than miraculous, by anything sort of a religious revival or unforeseeable dramatic shift in the spiritual moral thinking. As noted, the New York City Council offers public employees the option of choosing from 31 different gender identities, including pioneering gay communist Harry Hayes' two-spirit option, which is, we didn't cover in the book, but if you're a two-spirit. Of course, that's nothing compared to the Facebook, which at various times since 2014 has listed 51 gender options, 53, 56, 58, and 71. Or to the BBC, which as of 2019 teaches children that there are more than 100 and counting genders and ideologies. Where does it end? No one knows. The political...
Because it doesn't matter. Gender is something that it's a social construct. It's not. It's significant to people in the way that they see themselves and the way they are perceived by others. It is not significant in the sense that it changes anything radically about the reality of biological sex, right? Obviously, that's just always like a pretty fixed thing, unless evolution takes a different course, right? So reproduction remains the same, but people just, dressing the way they want, being with the partner they choose to be with, expressing themselves in certain ways, right? There's no cap on that. There's no limit. Like, it's like me as an artist, right? There's no limit to how many different songs I can create. I can create a song that's a rock song. I can create a country song. I create a folk song. It doesn't matter. There is no constriction on that, right? That is my free expression. If I write a song, which I have, that says that, Jesus Christ is not coming back, right? If that offends you, tough shit, man. I have the right to play that song, right? It's the same thing here. The same thing with gender identity, gender expression. Now, you might not like it. You might walk away from me, but you can't keep me from doing that. And I think that's the important thing, right? Like, in any other context, if you have an artist who, comes into a venue, they might... Well, okay. So I'll walk that back a little bit. It is more acceptable, right? And this might be incorrect, right? But the way we behave is that it is more acceptable for me to come into a bar and play a song you don't like. And if you don't like that song, you're going to best case scenario, you walk out of the bar and you go to a different place, right? Worst case scenario, you boo me off stage. Maybe you throw some garbage at me, right? But what you don't ever do is physically, forcefully remove me from the stage, right? And I think that's kind of what they're trying to do here. They want to just remove these people from the stage who they disagree with. And in this case, it's not, the private establishment. It's the public square. James Apperson says, I feel like everyone's kids are unsafe when they have to share a public bathroom with Christian fundamentalists. And that's valid, I mean, we can feel that way. I mean, and furthermore, and I know there's evidence for this, there's evidence that religious people, by and large, actually commit more SAs on in general, and especially with young people, than secular people, right? Or agnostic, whatever. than nuns. I can hear myself in the bathroom. Oh my goodness. Okay. And Skeptic Philosophy said, also Obama made people gay. Obama made my last pastor gay. Arg, curse you, Obama. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, it wasn't like these people weren't gay before Obama came along and said something about it. It's crazy. And then Apersona non grata says, especially if they are also MAGA. Those dudes will essay anything that can't run faster than them. Sadly.
The political left's cultural revolution on the sexual, gender, family front is ubiquitous.
Now I know my mic's not quiet because I just heard a preview.
You know what that means? It means it's everywhere, okay? As is its tolerance of any dissenters. And so we've said this again. The argument is, we just want tolerance, we want to be accepted. No, you don't. Now it's like, if you don't celebrate it, how dare you? The idea was, why does it matter what you call something? Why are you so upset that we want to call it marriage? And like, what's just a word? And now it's like, use the right pronoun or go to jail. And so you kind of got duped when you're like, words don't matter.
When did it? No. That just never happened. I want to see. I mean, I'm like, no, they never did that. They did something like that in Canada, but it's not even that serious. We've greatly exaggerated whatever law was passed in Canada. But in the United States, why can't I spell today? No. Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, like, no one has ever been jailed for misgendering a person in the U.S. It can be a factor in cases of workplace harassment. There are civil penalties like fines in some states, but misgendering alone is not typically a crime. Yeah, no law. They're not sending you to jail. Not then, not now, not ever before. It's just not happening, dude.
I was literally one of the people shouting out, hey, words matter. We see it in the culture of fear and intimidation by the self-prided forces of diversity and tolerance who viciously seek to denounce, dehumanize, demonize, and destroy anyone who disagrees with their brazen newfound conceptions of marriage and family, even as our inventions are at odds with the prevailing position of 99.9% of human beings who have bestrode the earth since the dawn of humanity. Not only that, the whole book we're going to cover next is about how all the new atheists, right? These guys are like, we love science. What made them turn against and turn back towards liking Christianity was that all of a sudden people are like, well, why are you not letting this other girl act like a boy? Like, what? The biology says you are a bigot. Like, what? That's the science. So like, bigot? Like, and then they're like, they didn't know where to go. And so it's not just the culture felt it that way.
So the only thing I can think he's referencing here is like Dawkins, who was like, yeah, biological sex is a fact. And he said some other unfortunate shit that's not really that important. Like, he doesn't represent all of atheism or new atheism or whatever, right? He's just one guy who had, kind of a bad opinion on some things. It doesn't, which, I mean, and then they also talk about like cultural Christianity, which I guess they're talking about in a way is like kind of unified morality, which we've already shown, like the humanist, American Humanist Association, all these people have already shown that it's not actually necessary to have, like the Ten Commandments, to have a cohesive moral foundation, right? That's not necessary. It's just the fact that these religious zealots, these fundamentalists, refuse to relinquish it. They refuse to adopt any type of new language or any type of even compromise. Like, you can still have the Ten Commandments and cohere to humanism in a sense, only that you would have to relinquish some of your bigotry, right? So, yeah, and I don't know exactly like where he intends to go with this, because it seems like they all point that one figure. Oh, well, that atheist one time said this, and it's like, okay, that doesn't represent all of us. It doesn't even represent most of us. In fact, it's contrary to what most atheists believe. So, yeah, I don't know. That it bothers me. Because I don't point to any one Christian and say, look, it's mostly these ideas that I see that are common among most of the believers that I see, right? And I don't think I would take an outlier in that way and use him to try to solidify my position. I would just say, hey, that's an inconsistency on your side that I can point out, right? That doesn't actually lend credence to my position. Skeptic Philosophy says, I now want to call this guy Miss every day and just wait to get, as he said, arrested. For certain. That'd be hilarious.
That way science felt it this way, going against all of it. Instead, traditional Christians, and even traditional atheists, anyone that like use logic, sense, normal logic, are portrayed as the outliers, as abnormal, extremists, bigots, and haters. And by the way, I've been saying this is kind of, I know I can't stop myself from going to the next book, but like people that aren't Christian are labeled these labels also, merely by not going along and towing the line. And so they're looking for a place of safety. And there is no such safety in secularism. The only safety is in the Word of God. We've known it all along. They pretended like they didn't know it, and now they have this. We have to offer this safety for normalcy, because there's no normalcy outside of it. Anyways, this is a fundamental transformation of a culture, a nation, and it's evidence of a true revolution by the heirs of Marx and other radicals. And let's just draw the connection so you understand what we're talking about. To fundamentally transform, here was in essence the inherently Marxist goal declared to a sea of oblivious Americans, whether Obama explicitly or fully understood or meant it himself. In other words, I don't think Obama was like, here's my plan, I'm gonna do this thing. I just think he was going along with the wave of Marxist thinking that he'd been standing on for a long time. It's highly doubtful that Obama had Marx, Marcuse, Millett, or Reich on the mind ultimately at that moment, but he'd been educated from them from his beginning. Right? Obama was merely riding a wave that began as a ripple over a century ago, and typically most of those surfing or floating along have little notion who or what helped give the initial push. There's a great story about kind of how this whole happens. When you think about sort of going along, like there's this poem or whatever, it talks about riding the narrow way, and it describes that when you go off into these, whether it's on the right or the left, when you go off into these ideologies that go crazy, you're not actually joining anything. What it is you're just stumbling off the narrow path. Like you just stumble off the narrow path and become a Nazi. And you're like, how's that possible?
I don't know about that. See, and I think there's a problem with like the way he, what was he saying earlier? He was calling them like radical thinkers, right? And so there's a fine line between radical and revolutionary, right? Anybody who's revolutionary by definition is going to be a bit radical. Anybody who's radicalized may be pushing toward revolution, right? But there is a bit of a fine line there. It's like, so what is the difference between a radical and an extremist, right? So I can be very like fervent and aggressive about certain ideas, right? Pushing maybe to try to get those things heard, try to get those, to make those arguments, right? It's like the difference between, once again, like protesting outside of an establishment and actually trying to blow that establishment up, right? And so they're confusing one with the other. And if we have a lot of people demonstrating, oh my goodness, well, no, that is one of the core foundational principles, is that those demonstrations are not only allowed, but is celebrated that we allow that, right? Which is the same reason that, Nazis can go and march out in the streets of, San Diego or wherever. And, this guy might be a part of one of those groups. I don't know.
How's that possible? I'm like, I don't know. How do we get to the place where, like, you have a bearded man in a dress reading to your children in the school? Like, you just...
I think that was the public library, but it's neither here nor there. And Skeptic Philosophy said, yes, Christians need safety against the equality of the gays. Yeah, because they're gonna turn us all gay eventually, right? That's because they've got a bearded man in a dress, Reading to children. What could be more harmful? Well, you know, interestingly enough, you know, the priests, right? The Catholic priest. What is that? That is a bearded man in a dress. Most, well, maybe not bearded anymore. I think most of them are clean shaven now. But back in the day, I'm sure they wore beards.
You just stumbled that way. People aren't like, you know what we should do next year? Let's do that. Like, you just fall into it because you abandon the narrow path. Like, you abandon truth, and all that's left is lunacy, like Romans goes into. But regardless, nonetheless, the goal of Karl Marx, the Marxist project from the outset, was one of fundamental transformation, permanent revolution, and unrestrained criticism. Let's that word again. If you're writing anything down at all, write that down. Unrestrained criticism.
There you go. So he didn't say anything about destruction, transformation, unrestrained criticism. By the way, is literally free speech. It's another word for free speech, my guy.
Of everything, nothing less than the ruthless criticism of all that exists, which is what Marxism would call about. And today, that's what we see in a thing called critical theory, which is just another word for Marxism. Marxism has been renamed critical theory, but I'll get to that. Marx's ideas were so radical, and so, as Marx openly conceded, contrary to the nature of things, that they inevitably led to totalitarianism. That is because they are totalitarian in the strictest sense, as they seek to transform human nature and the foundational order. Remember, he said that Marxists need to determine where you can.
So Marxism is a redistribution of wealth and power, right? Which is not at all. It's not the same, man. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's like a socioeconomic concept, right? And it is pointing towards something. It's important to remember always that, like, Marx himself said his work wasn't complete, right? He was building a foundation for other thinkers to build upon, right? It wasn't a complete, like, political, or it wasn't a complete system, right? He had certain things. He was like, okay, we need to take this out, reorganize, redistribute. Okay, but now you guys have to take it from here. You have to correct for all these errors because there's all these other variables in the system that we're going to have to account for, right? So Marx didn't say, oh, just do it this way. That wasn't what he said at all, right? He's laying out a framework for future thinkers to continue contemplating, which they have. And now apparently you don't even want them to do that. Even though they can't realistically implement any of this shit with all of you freaking guys out here. I don't know, man. My Awesome Life says, only the priest SA little kids and the book reader in a dress loves them. Yeah. That's true, too. Unfortunately. And... you know, this is actually, so I think there's a problem with all of Abrahamic faith, and it's something that, you know, is addressed more in the context of Islam. A lot of people will point at Aisha or whatever, right? But there are a lot of young girls being married off in the Bible, and in the context of Christianity throughout history, we see that happening, right? And so... There's passages in the Bible that interpret that this is okay practice, especially for very young women, very young girls rather, to be with much older men, right? This is not only accepted, right? It's in there. And then, you know, if a man essays a woman and they're not married, then all he has to do is pay the family off and marry her, and he's good, and he can just continue going on and doing that more, you know, because in a biblical worldview, the woman doesn't really have the right to say no, does she?
You can live, how much you can have. We've seen passages from Marx that affect throughout the book, but here's a short summary to remind you, okay? Marx in his manifesto said that communism represents the most radical rupture in traditional relations. Marx said in the manifesto he acknowledged that communism seeks to, quote, abolish the present state of things. He stated that they, the communists, openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible, violent overthrow of all existing social conditions. In the close of his manifesto, he says, communists everywhere.
I think he also said that in the context of like, wasn't he was in the USSR at the time, right? Was Marx, was that, or was that Bolsheviks? Was that before the USSR? I'm trying to think of like timeline now. Marx. Oh no, German. It's German. How did I not know that? Like, Marx wasn't Russian? 1818 to 1883, but what was the political system he was under? Prussian absolutism, and then British industrial capitalism. Okay, so yeah, a semi-feudal absolutist monarchy was beginning to undergo industrial economic transformation. So yeah, and I know him and Lenin, whatever, they influenced each other, so that has something to do with like the rise of the USSR, I guess, right? Yeah, 1922. So yeah.
Support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. In other words, any movement that seeks to take down the way things are right now, Marx is like, we like that, we'll go along with it. Which is, again, why you can have at the Women's March a bunch of feminists with genitalia hats, right, standing next to women in hijabs, both opposing essentially the religious right. And I'm like, you realize that if the lesbian transgender person went to the country that you're talking about, they'd be thrown off a building, and yet you guys have what in common? We hate...
We're fucking Americans. That's what we have in common, actually.
Western civilization. That's what they have in common. So
Yeah. They're exercising their rights under Western civilization. You have that wrong.
let's work together. Like, oh, okay. Marx had, in his letter to Arnold Ruge, called for the ruthless criticism of all that exists. He had a favorite quote from Goethe's Faust. I'm like trying to get it said right. Everything that exists deserves to perish, deserves to die. Marx in his essay declared religion the opium of the people and said that criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism. And so criticism is this favorite thing, and it has to start with criticism of Christ. But beyond ruthless criticism, there
Wait, he said religion. He didn't say Christ specifically. You said that.
was ruthless abolition. The word abolition is omnipresent through Marx's writings. As Robert Payne noted, the word almost seems to jump off every page of the Communist Manifesto. And after, quote, after he has abolished property, family, and nations in all existing societies, Marx shows little interest in creating a new society on the ruins of the old. I just want to stop right there. That's Marxism. Let me say it again. And none of this is exaggerated.
It's not, and that is a complete mischaracterization, right? Once again, it's an incomplete framework, right? It's establishing the foundations for, hey, we need to take these things out and rethink the structure, right, under which we are, like, and so this may be like akin to something like I was saying, and something like these, LGBTQ people are saying, and what gives the government the authority to say who I would marry and live with and be in partnership with? What gives the government the authority to legislate anything upon that, right? Well, they take it from the religious right. Those are the only large enough group of people that they can get to back them. It is those conservative religious right. Wow, some life said Germany. Yeah, no, so Marx was German, born in Prussia, as we discovered. For some reason I thought he lived in Russia, but Prussia and Russia are kind of close, so I got those two maybe confused or something. But I know he worked with Lenin as well, or influenced Lenin at least. And then along with Rosa Luxemburg. That sounds familiar to me, but I can't like immediately place the person with the name or what they did.
Exaggerated. I'm understating how bad it is. I've skipped over the hard stories that are just, I don't want to sit in this pulpit and read them out loud. I'm understating, but let me say it again. The goal has been to abolish property, to abolish the family, to abolish nations. You say, what is...
I don't know about the last part, abolish nations, is that in Marx. The abolition of private property, I know, is commonly misunderstood, right? Like in the communist model, all property is to some extent a shared space or shared environment, right? But right, like, so the purpose of it is that people are able to perform certain functions, right? Whether you're in a market, if you're in an apartment, like whatever space you're in, like inevitably that space is going to change hands. And so what Marx is trying to do there is to stop what is that? The transfer of wealth that says that, you know, any guy who can go buy 10 big apartment buildings, when he dies, he can will them down to his son, and then his son becomes the executor of these 10 apartment buildings, and so on and so forth, so that they continue to generate generational wealth in this way, right? This guy accomplishes X thing, and then he passes that on to his kids. Well, now his kids become wealthy in that industry, right? And what they do with that industry might vary. You can't predict it. So this is like, it's like a form of kingship, right? But in the economic sector. And so that's the type of thing that Marx wants to do away with. He wants to say these are communal spaces. Everybody is always going to need a place to live, right? And so we need to make a way that that one person is not hoarding this property, that is being used for the best interest of the collective society, and not being leveraged over other members of society for this one person, this one family, to continually generate wealth, right? Because this is a necessity.
LGBTQ plus have to do with open borders, Marxism. It is to abolish all boundaries of these things, and it's to abolish the West and ultimately abolish the Christian faith that has held it up. Marx shows little interest in creating a new society, and so what we're left with right now is a wasteland of destruction. We are living in a wasteland of depression.
I don't think it's so much that he's not interested in creating a new society, right? At some point you run out of ideas, or you say, hey, maybe I can't make all these decisions, right? I can tell you what's wrong with it, but I can't tell you what all the solutions are, right? No one man can do that. And the idea of communism, collectivism, in of itself says that one person should not even attempt to do that, right? You have to get the collective to come together and make these decisions and figure out what's right for society. Individuals cannot do this on their own.
Of depression, of all sorts of drug use. And again, this is where, as Christians, we have to be bold about the gospel and winsome about how the gospel is good news. But he'd written a poem to Jenny that he would overthrow a gauntlet at the world. He'd throw a gauntlet at the world and watch it crumble. And, basically he called himself like the god of Satan. He's going to come out and fight against God. It was just, but it was more,
Did he say that at all? That would be really interesting. Tristan! Out. Sorry, I got an intruder. Many apologies.
more benign modern defenders want to characterize Lenin and Stalin and other tyrants as aberrations of Marxism, right? Like they misread them. as the nasty totalitarians seeking to annihilate the old order. So people do this all the time. They'll say, Marx said reasonable things, but then you got Lenin and Stalin, they went crazy. Now you see this another way. They say Marx said reasonable things, but that homeless guy that's on drugs, that's twitching and saying stuff and yelling satanic things out loud, like that's who Marx looked like. Remember that chapter? Marx had boils, he didn't wash, he didn't work. He said crazy things all the time. Like you want to go down downtown San Diego? That's what Marx looked like. And that his philosophy and his ideology creates that. Same thing too when you look at the crazy totalitarian regimes. They are, again, a feature, not a bug. They were merely following Marx.
Wait. So I just got to get this straight. So homeless people are a feature of communism, not a bug. But in the case of our present democratic, federal, whatever the fuck it is, republic, right? What is it in this case? Is it not still a bug in the system? Right? I mean, either way, you are left with the same problem. You still have, quote unquote, lepers or whatever. You still have the same problem of homelessness and addiction. And actually, I think, I'm trying to think of a good example, but in countries where there are no prohibitions against drug use, you have far less instances of long-term addiction. There are studies about that, I believe, but yeah, that is my understanding there.
Marx, the ultimate revolutionary rebel. Marx wanted to burn down the house long before Lenin and Stalin were even born. Lenin himself would profess the same. He talks about in one of his speeches, he talks about the task of the Young Communist League, and then he focuses mainly on the youth. Lenin says this, he goes, it's the youth that'll be faced with the actual task of creating the communist society. And then he goes on and basically says, our task is to destroy it. Basically, we're going to kill everyone and everything, and the task of our youth will be to rebuild the communist society that we want. That's what Lenin's basic kind of quote was. Lenin, communist, Bolshevik, self-anointed keeper of the Marxist flame, half namesake of Marxist-Leninism, couldn't have been more clear. The task was, again, to destroy the foundation of the old system. The whole point here, said Lenin, was the transformation of the old capitalist society, the upbringing, training, and education of the new generations that will create the communist society.
See, and the language there is telling, right? He talks about transformation. He talks about revolution. He doesn't talk about destruction. And no revolutionary is talking about destruction, right? Revolutionaries, by definition, they want change, they want progress, they do not want destruction. They're doing, whether right or wrong, what they believe is in the best interest of society. Not to destroy the society, but to improve it. Right? And we have to at least give intentions merit, whether correctly or incorrectly guided, right? Intentions do matter. So I'm not going to say that every Christian out there is just trying to destroy, it's like out to get me, right? Like that is conspiratorial thinking. Completely irrational. We'd call you paranoid, delusional to think that all of these people are just out to get you, right? They may have best intentions. That's fine. I can grant that, but I don't think that this person can. We'll go just a little bit further, and I'll have to shut down for the evening here. But
cannot be conducted on the old lines. The teaching, training, and education of youth must be directed to that goal. Quote, only by radically remolding the teaching, organization, and training of the youth shall we be able to ensure that the efforts of the younger generation will result in the creation of a society that will be unlike the old, and the creation of a communist society. And by the way, don't miss this. The entire school structure system in our nation has been run by communists from the very beginning who have had the goal of propagandizing the children from the very beginning. It doesn't mean that you're wicked if your kids went to I'm a public school kid. But the old schools of Lenin must produce servants needed by the capitalists. We have to abolish them and create, basically schools in our image. The new aim, said Lenin, was simply...
What? Okay, public schools are inherently communist, apparently, because they are secular, right? Of course, that's going to be the argument.
To learn communism.
He's not actually going to make it. He's just going to infer it, I guess.
Goes into this. I'm not going to go through it too much. But basically, it's always been focused on the youth and the young people. And again, that's true right now. There's a war on your children, and you should understand that. Communism.
There's a war on your children. If they're trying to convert your children, the war is not on them. The war is still on you, right? And I was hearing something about this earlier. Apparently, like, so current events, right? So this war between Russia and Ukraine, the invasion of Russia on Ukraine, right? Which effectively began back in like 2014 or so. So apparently, a tactic the Russians adopted, right, was they actually abducted a bunch of these Ukrainian kids, and then they trained them as soldiers. They taught them to hate Ukraine, and now they are sending them back to Ukraine at fighting age, having been effectively brainwashed against their own people. And so this is a thing that they've done, right? Destructive, yes, but to what ends, right? They are actually assimilating these kids into their culture to make them fighters. So, interesting. And I think this is probably a strategy that many religions have used over the years. Jesus even himself was like, I'm going to turn the son against their father, or whatever the thing was, right? He was not about the family. And so to achieve those ends, these are the types of things they will do. And influencing and actually nurturing children, but providing them influence is one tactic that a group can use against an enemy group. That's not unheard of. Something that humans do.
Communism would become the central guiding principle and force they wanted in the lives of young people. This generation should know that the entire purpose of their lives is to build a communist society. And right now, if you go to Harvard, Yale, you go to SDSU, San Diego State, and you poll the kids, they are more communist, more socialist than the previous generation. They're like, yeah, of course, equity. Like this, obviously, you're not dumb if you're in here, but people say dumb things. They don't know what they're saying. That's the whole point.
Very true. I think we will stop for tonight on that note. And yeah, that's a good place to end it. People don't know what they're saying. That's the whole point. That's right. Exactly. And we'll go and finish that up at a later time. It sounds, or smells rather, like I'm going to be having some leftover turkey. I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy to be most of the way moved into my new place here with Mrs. Ape, my awesome life. Yeah, that's about that for now. Since we got interrupted during the theme song. We'll go to a less conspicuous outro. One of those impromptu instrumentals with no no plan. Later, Skeptic Philosophy, thank you for coming by. My Awesome Life. Persona Non Grata, aka James Apperson. This troll. YTPMV Master. What is that? Is that Nunya Biz? That spelled the N-word in my side chat? I don't know. I kind of think I recognize the avatar. What else did I see here? Daniel Barry Sports Highlights, of course, was here earlier in the stream. Much love to everybody. Sunday may be a busy day. Probably a busy day. I may try to conduct Church of Ape Monday. With any luck. But anyway, my schedule's still a little screwy. I noticed shortly before we started this stream, apparently I had hit the 250 subscriber mark again. We'll see whether that has withstood the test of time here. But that's awesome. I think we were up to 250 at one point and then dropped by a few, so people come and then they go and then maybe they come back or different people show up. Who knows how all that works. But this is right where it was a few years ago with my old channel before it got deleted. And so I consider a milestone. You know, it's like a quarter of the way to 1,000 people, and I've got like almost 700 videos now, or you know, at least over 600. I don't remember where those numbers were exactly. So, you know, maybe if I make like 1,000 videos, I'll get like, you know, 400 subscribers or something. Not that it's, you know, that important. I don't do this for subscriptions necessarily, but I do enjoy engagement. And anything else for housekeeping? No, not right now. I'll probably be posting something over at the Stupid Monkey Philosophy channel, also known as Answers in Stoicism, here soon. It's a short clip I took that I might introduce some commentary on or use as an intro or something. I don't know. Something will come up over there. And then on my music channel, Kevin Lentini Music, I will be attempting to release some previously unreleased tracks that you can listen to over there in some format. So I've got to work on that. That's all I've got. Links to the video we watched and other relevant content are down in the description box, as well as links to donate, ways to get a hold of me, and links to play chess as well. So all that's down there, of course. And thank you to all who've joined, past, present, and future. Much love, be kind, be well, and stay trusty. See you next time.